looking at the strongest team once again, but making it a little bit stronger. I showcased this team exactly before in a prior video. You guys gave it in the comment section a few ideas to make it potentially even stronger, or at least more fun. I think strongest one out there is potentially this, but we're gonna give it a try on a few. So why is it that strong? Well, we have a 33 lead, and with that 33 lead, the next tick, which is tick 4, is going to be 358. At that moment, you're in tick 4, and we actually have that on fire over here, and we do also have that on fire over here, which is still moving in front of you. It's not the best of stats over here because you don't really need the crit rate, and it's an accuracy 6, but then again, that's the only way that can actually make it work. Unless I would, maybe, no, I would probably not be able to get that otherwise anyhow. And then this thing is going to be for a despair plus a focus. So let's first see how this team would work, and then let's see some of the upgrades that you guys suggested, and then also a few upgrades that I thought about myself. So first of all, how does this team look like? Well, in this case, there's no will, so it's pretty easy on that. We do go in the Lord of Hell state, and in the Lord of Hell state, we can do a massive amount of damage. Moment we start dealing massive amounts of damage, and right now if we get the right team up, everything just starts dying. That's just the whole idea to this. Everything just starts massively dying. I also don't really think any of that matters all too much. You go for that one. That's an interesting take. Would have been not surprised if you went for the middle one. Bit of a bruiser fight out there, but yeah, you come back over there, we can throw this to you, and then we can still fight this bruiser fight relatively easily. This match actually did not show as much strength because you kind of have to rotate to get 2 skills of you off, but in the end, the moment you team up with her, if she's in the normal state, she goes back to the Lord of Hell state pretty darn fast. And that's just pretty darn strong in the first place. So how can we make this team even better? Well, there are a few ways where you can force in team ups on any kind of unit. And I was thinking about gargoyles, but those don't really work. I was actually thinking about the hollyberry cookie on fire, but that one also doesn't really work. Well, the gargoyles do work, but the hollyberry cookie did not work. But there's a few options that actually would work. And a very first option would be a Hongyong. With Hongyong, you go into the state where you play your melody. You even get attack buff, which is also the only way to give attack buff to this unit. Because normally, if you give her attack buff, she will take attack buff on her human form. Moment she goes in Lord of Hell, she has a new set of pretty much everything. So she has new HP, but also therefore new buffs and debuffs. If you go to the Lord of Hell state, you will lose your attack buff. But the moment you go back, you will still remain on that attack buff. So that's kind of a weird interaction right there, but that is exactly how that works. Okay, so let's just give you a bit of a speedy set. And I actually want to test it right after this by rather making these units into the tick 4, actually making you on a fast rage set, which is still in tune to outspeed the things that we're fighting right now. And let's just see if we get 2 skills off on an attack buff, how much damage we're dealing. Of course, it is a lot better against a team that's full non-will. Most of the teams would be full on-will, so therefore we kind of have to just check, like, hey, do we already do half HP damage with just the first hit, because second hit might be on death break. So we're looking at 10Ks per hit on an attack buff right now. If we were to get additional turns in, we're looking at 32Ks. And then from this hit on, it's just insta death. So that is definitely one of those things, especially for this stick, especially for having the chance to Vio. That is pretty darn nasty. That's actually a lot of damage flying in right there. Plus, every turn that any of those units take, they will still get the attack buff every time as long as you're playing your song. Right now, you could actually team up with this, but more of a funny gimmicky-ish thing where you want to cleave rather than you want to Vio. So let's actually rune it up as a cleave rather than a Vio. In this case, definitely not something that's fully in tune, but we added in a lot of crit damage right now with a decent bit of attack. Did not really optimize like the absolute best set I could do, but in this case, we still have a Vio potential in here, but no longer Vio potential in here. So we did do about 10k on that first hit last time on the mid unit. Let's see if we do a lot more damage right now, which actually might make it where this becomes a little bit more instant to play. The enemy team is not super fast. If it were to be super fast, this thing only is a 15 boost. You probably have to be playing with a little bit more speed on these two units than what I'm rocking right now. But let's just see the damage that we're looking at. 26k on the middle on just that first hit already. That's absolutely bonkers. I did not land a single defense break. If I had 1 or 2 defense breaks, I would probably already murder things. Which, damn, I want to see that on a defense break because that's some massive damage coming in already. Wow. In this case, I also do have low accuracy on you, so therefore it's not the highest of chance to actually immediately death break, but that is definitely a cleave and a half right there. That's a good bit of damage. And this is also the only unit in game which can provide me on an attack buff after or like before taking the turn of her and then providing an attack buff. Anything else would have to provide the attack buff by moving after her rather than in front of her. So 26k death break on that right away. Death break on actually on 2. 57.9 and 48k. Yo, things are dying. That's that 60k. That's a cleave and a half. That's definitely a cleave and a half right there. Wow, damn. Of course, this would only work if you actually do death break. If you don't death break, you don't get that much hits in this, and then there's no strip on this team. So therefore, it's a little bit less likely that it would work fully on. But it's definitely cool if it does work. There's also another way where you could even make it slower and more damagey-ish on this thing. However, you would lose the attack buff, which is throwing in a Robo. Because Robo skill 3 ups your attack bar by 50 and lowers theirs by 50. Which is technically 100 attack bar differentiating between you and the enemy. Which makes it where on a 33 base, you can make this thing pretty fast. And you can actually make this thing almost no speed at all. So let's give that a try. Okay, so right now we have a big speed gap between the two units, but let's see if it still does work. We have a lot of crit damage and a lot of attack on this one right now, and just a lot of damage over here. We should actually switch out this relic. If we switch out the relic, this relic would technically do more damage on this kind of shape because we do hit that threshold like 3 times, 2 times, probably just 2 times. But that's still a little bit more damage than the other one right there for the just pure attack. So let's see. In this case, we of course do get fully like outsped by these things if this thing wasn't that fast. But it is that fast. Already does do a bit of chip damage as well, which is kind of nice and can potentially already stun. But now the big question, how much damage is this thing gonna do? We had like 27k on the mid one last time around, 22k right now. That is because of losing the attack buff. So the attack buff still has higher value than just getting in a pure damage set. Like we were doing like about 60k. Well, it was 60k on this one, like 50 something. So it was like 50k on this one. So in the end, a attack buff is stronger than just going pure for like as much stats as possible. But nevertheless, this does have a little bit more chip damage. The only issue is, however, that this is definitely a little bit less for a bruiser fight in case things tend to survive. But it does give you also a little bit more chance of outspeeding because you only need 1 unit actual properly fast. And look at how much attack bar these units have compared to this one. So the attack bar is definitely something that you could work with. And in this case, things definitely do tend to die. Yeah, absolutely. Another unit that you can kind of do a similar thing, but I think it is a little bit worse, is a Dr. Richard. Because you can make him stun himself. And then your allies do get a bar the moment you get under inability effect. 35 bar is a good bit, but it's not like the 100 bar that we had on the other unit. But I just kind of want to see like how much bar do we give on this thing with this. The enemy in this case is not super fast, so we should definitely be bound to outspeeding regardless. But I just kind of want to see like how much does it do. I do not care for those artifacts at the moment. Just kind of giving it an idea of like, hey, how much are you actually doing on this? So we do stun ourselves, and then you get the bar, which is enough to cut, but the enemy is not super fast. So if the enemy was actually any faster, we would have probably not cut right there. So it's better to do this with a Robo rather than doing it with this guy. And as you can see, we did already get cut, and therefore your team up just did not happen. So Dr. Richard in this case, not the greatest out there. Robo would be a little bit more interesting. However, this thing might be a little bit better for a late game bruiser shenanigans-ish, but I think that the Robo Cleave would do better on this. Another unit that people did mention in the comment section to go for a guaranteed team up was actually this one, which gives the irresistible and then leaves the battlefield, which in most cases not going to be that interesting unless you guarantee the outspeed already, but it could be a something. I do really wonder how they're going to buff this one, because that unit for now is so ass and I absolutely have no clue what's the whole deal with it. But if the full enemy has no will runes, then it is something you can do where you leave the battlefield and then you can actually go for your hits, and therefore this will also guaranteed land. However, there's not a full activation rate on this. So with the new full activation rate, you might still miss a thing or two, which is not that great. But At least you can kind of cycle if you were on crit rate, which we are currently not. Funny enough, it's also where we get the Oblivion. It's not that you insta-die, which you have normally with a Beast Rider. This thing just goes back into the normal state. And from that normal state, you can once again start bruising on. And if you get like 2 or 3 procs, you're back into the Lord of Hell state, which is actually kind of funny too. So in this case, I would definitely not say that she is that interesting for this at all. Or legit, if she's interesting for anything yet, I have no clue in all honesty, because I've never seen this thing being used by anyone. And I think there's pretty good reasons for it. People also did mention things such as a secret, which is definitely an option, but making her move in front is going to be very awkward. I'll show that first, but making her move after might actually be pretty decent. The only thing is then, once again, you don't really have that strip potential in there. But let's just see how it looks. Because the thing is, if you move in front, you're not going to be teaming up with the Lord of Hell. You're going to be teaming up with the normal version. And teaming up with the normal version doesn't really give you anything. Plus, we have an attack buff right now, and ta-da! It disappears. So that's also what I did mention. You keep the attack buff on the other form. You don't keep it on this form. If I were to switch back right now, ta-da! Attack buff once again. So that is one of those things you don't really want to have an attack buffer in front. But what if we make the attack buffer move after? And just for the fun of it, we're going to give it triple fight, because I do think that triple fight still outspeeds that shenanigans over there. But we'll see if that is actually the case. Once again, if you were to actually fight will runes, you would probably have an issue with this, and you probably don't really want to do this, but yeah, just for the idea of it, let's see if it's any good. So we did miss over there, but we are on violent runes right now, so we can actually violent. We do team up with the right thing. We did not defense break a single thing. That's also one of those issues. If you landed an attack break, you already can no longer roll for a defense break. The thing is with her skill 1 is, I will showcase that in just a second. Think that nothing, yep, okay, nothing died, that's fine. You do your turn, whatever, yep. So the issue is that you have this or thing. So you go for a 75 check for your defense attack power down. If the enemy already has one or the other, you go for stuns. So the issue is, if you were to land your attack break, then you can no longer land a defense break, because it immediately goes for the chance of stunning, which is just a lot worse. Which also makes it a little bit weird. But then again, it does work out. Only thing is that we could team up with the wrong one over there. A way to actually make this better is, rather than using a secret, is going for a Aragorn. And of course, I know you can also do it with the water one, but this one is just a little bit more fun. Only thing we need to make sure is that you have the highest amount of attack, but that shouldn't be too hard. However, in the normal state, I would rather be kind of more in tune, but then again, you get the idea. Does also provide a defense break on the S2, which is kind of nice, but that defense break will happen after we hit with our own units anyways. Plus the Sylvia team up right now could go towards the Aragorn. In this case, it did not go towards the Aragorn. But if it were to go towards the Aragorn, it would have been kind of bad. But at least we get this hit in on a potential full defense break, which is actually kind of nice in this team up sense. So for that part, it is actually kind of nice, but once again, you wouldn't use it because of the strip issue. Of course, we could force in a strip and then still kind of do the same thing. The only thing is then you would have to make sure that this thing is more of a damage set rather than a pure on Vio set like this one is right now. Plus, we don't really need that speed contesting as much anymore. But let's just see what we can do. Also, kind of an issue is this thing has so freaking much base attack, it's insane. We should be on enough attack right now. If I just don't give you any attack artifacts, you have both attack artifacts. Should work for now. Let's still try the Vio set first, and then we're gonna go for an actual proper damage set. Just for the idea of it. This way, it would actually be something that I would see people using. Then again, it is a little bit premium out there. You can also just do a similar thing with a Gemini in here, or a Chiwu, or, well, I would rather go for a Gemini, because then you have a potential defense break setup already. But yeah, and then we can go for, what do we rather kill? I think we were to, oh, we still team up with you. Too much attack for you still. Wow, that's actually a rough thing. Let's just up your attack a little bit by lowering, well, whatever. We can also just do it simply this way, where we give you a more proper nuke. Same for that one over there. And let's just switch you out to be a attack 6, because we no longer need this. Funny enough, I always feel like, oh, I'm lacking crit rate, but you actually don't need jack shit for crit rate on this one. But that's a little bit of a better set that should totally do the thing. As mentioned on the Gemini, it is kind of doable, but the Gemini doesn't give attack bar gain, and the attack bar gain makes it where the nuking part becomes a lot easier. Otherwise, you have to make all 3 units super crazy fast. But in this case, it is pretty substantial damage, I would say. So We do get that hit in over there on potentially multiple death breaks. If I had a team like this, I would probably use it. But then again, you can only use it kind of against slower-ish teams because you don't have a speed lead and you're just basing it off the base of the Eludia, which is not crazy fast, but that's a pretty massive nuke. That would actually be a pretty cool team. Then again, it is a little bit premium. Just a little bit right there. It's not really something that you're going to be using or having all too much in there. Keep in mind that this thing is still Vio, because it can just Vio proc its way into it. Let's put that on Rage just for the... it's just because it's funny. Okay, back to the old Rage set. That does mean that I have to make you about a 11 speed slower as well. This is definitely the part where you're kind of like making it tricky for how much speed do you need, and therefore I would not really use it, but then again, it's still funny. I was just looking for some big numbers. So the Vio set would make a little bit more sense for actually speed checking this, because this would be where the enemy could be a lot faster than I am right now. But at least now we did cover the whole, like, oh, you cannot use this against a team with will runes. This case, you can actually use this against a team with will runes, and that's a really massive amount of damage. Like, it's just, wow. Wow, how much damage is that in total? Like, how much damage is that full rotation on that Narsha? So I want to look at the big numbers. So how much do we do if we do get a defense break? About a 10k over there. Then we go for this. We also have a no-will kind of scenario over here because we did not defense break. So just let's see how much damage we do on that. So we keep 10k in mind. With the 10k, we add another 37k. So we're already at 47k. With that 47k, we can also add another, how much? 47 and another 60. So we're dealing a 107k damage rotation on one singular target over there. And we pretty much do that whole AoE. So we do a 100k damage cycle on the whole team if we land all of the strips and all of the death breaks, which is absolutely insane. There's not too many units that can do a 100k damage cycle in just 3 units. Sure, Zyros could maybe do it with like a Galleon. Well, would a Zyros with a Galleon get that close? I don't even think so. Maybe a Grogan S3, S2 on a really strong Grogan or something, but it is rough to get that much damage in. And you do have multiple death break scenarios as well, where she does, in the end, also provide death break by herself, which is definitely very strong. Only thing you got to keep in mind, this doesn't outspeed that much more than just like a 300-ish speed kind of scenario, because you don't boost that much speed with an Eludia and you don't really work with a speed lead, but it is kind of cool where you do a setup of like pretty much 100k damage. That's absolutely insane. Then for the final one of today, let's go for a Kadis next to it. So rather than the Iris, we go to a Kadis. I do think that an Iris is a lot better because of the AoE hits, but Kadis skill 1 is actually really annoying as well. And we're going to put him on Swift, just to have that first chance of actually landing anything already before we actually start the Bruiser fight and before we do have the other hits coming in. With, of course, some additional damage artifacts, and we're looking at a 230 set, which... of course, a Revenge will be better, but we're just kind of having fun over here. And this is a team that you could actually use. I would still say that an Iris is probably a little bit more interesting, but what you can do over here is go for a single target strip right away, or you can actually land just this skill right away, which already does do a good bit of damage right there. Plus, well, there's one issue, however, it does give the attack break, and because of the attack break, you immediately go for stunts rather than for defense break. But in the end, still pretty solid right there. Only thing is that if you start teaming up with that, it is really good for himself giving attack bar and that kind of shenanigans, but it's not that great for just dealing the most amount of damage. But actually, the two of them, wow, this... I'm kind of surprised how much I like Kadis on that hit right there. Okay, cool, you go for those hit, that's all fine. Let's just do this on self. Well, should you actually do that on self? Probably never, but sure. Let's skill you out. Suddenly it's a Kadis showcase, which is not that bad neither. Let's strip that right there. Another Kadis hit. Kadis does take a shit ton of attack bar doing these kind of hits. That's actually true. Okay, now he's not going to do any shits anymore. That is for sure. I'm getting clapped by this unit right here. Or am I? Nope. Kadis turn. You never take a turn. Well, if you just have these units next to one another, like that's definitely a funny one too. Okay, let's just go for a little bit of a brand over you over there right there. Man, I need a Sylvia. I'm low-key so close on just putting SP up on Sylvia, but then again, getting anything from the SP up is super low chance by the first place. So, is it really worth anything? I don't know. Probably I still go for an RTA unit because I'm more of an RTA player than a Siege player, but it would definitely be a fun thing. Let's just go this for you right there. Let's push you back, and then let's push you back even more. And these hits come in, do absolutely nothing. Push you back even more. You take 0 turns whatsoever. We go back to the Lord of Hell state. I would definitely say Iris 1 feels a little bit stronger because you can get the random despair stunts and stuff. But you do deny a lot of turns on this cycling too. But it's still the best part where the team up is just simply with the Lord of Hell, aka the Liliana. But then again, that was definitely fun. We had a lot of fun teams over there. Would I still just use the Iris team? Most likely, because I think it's the most all-round, most safe, most things if things do actually tend to have will runes. But would I try a Cleave here and there if I had the Sylvia one? Absolutely, because especially for Siege offense, I could see some Cleaves where I just would straight up Cleave it and that would totally be fine. Probably with the Hongyong, I think that's the easiest Cleave to actually pull off. Well guys, that's all for this video. I see you as always in the next one. Thanks for watching. If you would like to see more guides, join the Discord and check out the content tab for the guide video archive, which contains all of the guides that you might need. Hope to see you there.